I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I'm joined by Miss Gretchen Schoser. She is co-host of an award-winning mental health podcast and is a dedicated advocate for the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. As a suicide attempt survivor, she has combined a rich tech background with personal experience to inspire and empower. At only 61, she has created a company that champions resilience and growth. And in this episode, she invites us to explore how embracing challenges and vulnerabilities can lead to profound personal growth and hope. So I'd like to give a huge welcome to Miss Gretchen. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Noah. I am so excited to be here. I thank you so much for having me on. I'm just really blessed to be here.
Well, I think your story is very, very impactful, and I cannot wait to dive into it and have you share your background. So please, introduce yourself and just tell my audience what you do and just a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So my name's Gretchen Schoser. I'm now 62 years old. My story started back in 2022. And I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. But after all my horrible pain, I turned it into a beautiful purpose. I have an amazing podcast that I co-host, and I actually opened my own company at 61, just at the beginning of this year. I turned 62 since then. And I want people to see me as a story of hope, because no matter how depressed you are, if you have the gumption to like pull yourself up, you can find that happiness too. There was no easy button. Been going to therapy for 2 years now and still working on myself, but I'm happy to be alive, more so than any other time in my life.
So tell me a little bit about your background with mental health and as well as share your story about your suicide attempt. Yeah.
Be more than happy to tell you. So back in the last quarter of 2022, I had a lot of stuff going on. A lot of small things that just kept building upon each other. And the problem for me is I am a 100% extroverted and I'm an empath. So I was taking care of everybody else, but I didn't take care of myself. So in September of 2022, I had been working for a company for 15 years. I had loved my job up until the point when we had been acquired. Once we got acquired, my job just became a shit show every day. And so in September, I got an email saying that I had been approved for early retirement. Okay. And it should have been a good thing. But remember, at the time, I was 59 and a half. And I still wanted to work. And there is still a ton of ageism in the workforce. I like my bougie toys. And so I wanted to be able to work. And so that was playing in the back of my mind. On top of all of that, my wife ended up getting shingles. And if you've ever met anybody that has gotten shingles, you know that there's absolutely nothing you can do for them. She was sick for 8 weeks. The most horrible, debilitating thing you can ever watch somebody go through. While all that was going on, I hit and killed a deer, which was I was mortified and so incredibly sad. Because I love animals. Then I got catfished, but at that time, like my brain started to like kick back into action, and before I spent any money on a fake person, we had a really close friend of ours pass away unexpectedly, and then my father-in-law died 2 days before Thanksgiving. During all this time, nobody at work knew how depressed I was because as an extrovert, I threw my mask on. People would ask me how I was doing. It's like, hey, I'm living the dream. Everything's good. In the back of my mind, all I wanted to do was die. I was just done. And, here comes December, and we had made plans to go to New York City. And, people didn't put two and two together. I ended up getting really super drunk, totally not what I do. I ended up losing my phone. I broke my nose in New York City. And if you want to learn more about that whole trip, go back and listen to season 1, episode 3 of our podcast. Maybe don't listen at work because it is not safe for work, but it gives you some clues on like things not to do when you're in New York City. Then comes Christmas Day. And by the time Christmas rolled around, I was just done. Mentally, I just couldn't do it anymore. And for me, I couldn't find my voice and I couldn't find my footing because I didn't understand what was going on with me. Being 59 and a half, I'd been taught my entire life that you shove this down. You do not talk about what's going on inside your head. And for me, I still felt that shame, that stigma, that weakness because I couldn't fix myself. All I know is I kept getting more depressed and more depressed. So I go out to my car on Christmas Day because I just wanted to go for a drive. For me, that's just kind of how I clear my head. I get out to the car, I go to start it, it wouldn't start. It was minus 22 here, and so our cars wouldn't start at all. I came back into the house completely defeated, and I went upstairs, and I don't even think my wife knew I'd come back in the house. I went upstairs, and there was a bottle of pills waiting for me on my dresser. I emptied the bottle of pills into my hand, and as I'm doing that, I'm not a very spiritual person, but I felt someone talking to me saying that things were going to be okay and that it was going to get better. And it was like my glimmer. We all hear of those little things called glimmers. So it was this glimmer, and I had my cell phone in my hand, and I had remembered like a couple months prior that I'd heard of the 988 Suicide Crisis Hotline. I was like, oh, it can't hurt, right? Because I was in so much pain and I just wanted it to stop. But I didn't really want to die either at that same moment. So I called 988. The lady on the other end of that line was the most compassionate person I've ever spoken to in my entire life. She gave voice to what was going on inside of me. She told me that it sounded like I was very depressed, and very depressed and depressed are two totally different things. But she gave me voice to what was happening, and she gave me a ton of resources. So she'd given me a list of like therapists I could contact, which I did right after that call. But after that call, I went down and I talked to my wife for like over 3 hours. And she was mad. She was mad because I hadn't told her what was going on. But when you don't understand what's going on in your own body, it's hard to put words to that feeling. And we worked through it for like 5 or 6 months before I even felt comfortable telling her some of the other things that were going on inside me. And yes, I had somebody here, but sometimes you need that third person, a third party that's not associated with you to air that out and help you figure out what was going on. And so the day after everything went down, I opened up to social media because, as I said, I am a true extrovert and an empath, and nobody knew how depressed I was. I would show up to work every day. People would be like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'd be like, "I'm living the dream. I'm good." But in reality, we all knew I wasn't doing good. And once I did that, I had about 200 people reach out and say thank you, because now they felt seen, they felt heard, they felt validated, and they didn't feel alone in their own journey. And so that was my first healer. And then my second healer was my co-host, Dirty Skittles. And I use this term super loosely because I retired from work about 4 months later, but she was my manager at the time. But we'd also been friends for a really long time. And work was a very toxic, like a super toxic work environment. We would call each other every morning and laugh about things you should never, ever, ever, ever laugh about. But here's the great thing about laughter. It breaks up that cortisol and increases your serotonin and your endorphins. And so no matter how crappy the day was, we could like think back to that conversation we had in the morning and we'd just start laughing again. And then that cortisol goes away and the serotonin goes away. And it was during one of those conversations, she's like, "Hey, we should do a podcast." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do a podcast." So we released that first episode on February 14th, 2023, in honor of my mom. I had buried my mom in 1997 and had wanted to change the trajectory of that day because I was tired of feeling the pain of that day. And Dirty Skills and I were like, "Oh, we'll just do 3 episodes and like be done." Joke was on us. By April of that year, we had like 10,000 downloads, and we're still trying to figure out who the fuck listened to us, okay? Because we are not clinical by any means. We are the exact opposite of clinical, and I think that's why people gravitate towards the podcast, because we let people be super vulnerable and share their stories. And every time we share our stories, we unlock somebody else's prison. And I had wished that there had been a podcast like ours when I was going through my own stuff. Because every other podcast that I listened to was super clinical and boring. It was like, you remember Ferris Bueller? So I'd be like listening to these podcasts and I'd hear Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. And I'd like wake up and like skip back like 30 seconds because I had fallen asleep. And we've just had like some incredible guests that have helped with my own growth and my own healing. And I had ended up getting another job with a smaller consulting firm. And I worked there for about 1.5 years. And then in November of last year, everything changed. The company got bought by got acquired by one of the top 5 consulting firms. And, I had said when I retired that I was never going to work for a big company again. Corporate America had already burned me out and I was done. And I had compromised my entire life. And I was like, I'm not compromising this time. And so I would go to work every day and I would have resting bitch face. And like, I could not turn it off. Once you turn resting bitch face on, it doesn't get turned off very fast. But this time when I got super depressed, everybody knew because I was very open about what was going on with me. I took my mask off and I allowed people to come in and help me out. And by this time, I'd also had 2 years of really good tools that I'd gotten from my therapist that allowed me to like sit with my feelings and kind of figure things out. So in December of 2024, my wife and I were in New York City and having dinner. And she's like, "You know what? I know you really hate your job. You should go ahead and quit." Okay, so if you've ever been in that experience before where you hate something so much but you don't know what to do, I felt like I shedded this heavy weighted x-ray blanket off my shoulders and like I had a new life. But once again, that conversation came back into my head, like I need to work because I like my bougie toys, my iPhone, my Mac, all those things. And flying home from New York City, I forgot how long it takes to de-ice a plane. I'm thankful it took like 2 hours because I had my cell phone, I had ChatGPT, and I had my resume. So I uploaded my resume into ChatGPT. I said, based on my 45 years of, corporate America and everything I've done with the podcast to form an independent consulting firm. So about 2 minutes later, ChatGPT came back, gave me a laundry list of things I could do. I cut that list down by about 2/3 because there was stuff on there that I had done earlier in my career that I never wanted to do again. And I came back to work on January 2nd and put in my 2 weeks notice, and people were shocked. I'm like, do you people not know how to read the room? Like I've had resting bitch face since November. And same day, I went ahead and opened my company in the state of New York. And on January 22nd of this year, I went ahead and launched my business.
That's that's such an impactful story, going from rock bottom to leaving your job and opening up your own company, and as well as having a successful podcast. Like a lot of people don't know that not only has it gotten tens of thousands worth of streams, it's been nominated and has been won awards. So, has the podcast been kind of a way for you to cope with your past trauma and be able to open up? And has it been like your own therapy?
Oh, for sure. So we record, 7 episodes one Saturday a month. And that's like free therapy for us. And we've had some like amazing guests, and they've talked about things that they've done that I never thought about. And even for us, like resources that we gave out even 2 years ago, those resources are gone. And so bringing on bringing these guests on that have gone through these really traumatic experiences or have dealt with like really hard mental health things has helped us. And we we're out there trying to make the world a little bit better place. And for us, our mission has always been normalizing those conversations we have around mental health. Because when it was all said and done, and I sit back and I reflect every Christmas. I sit back and reflect on like where I was on Christmas Day 2022. There was still that shame and that stigma and that feeling of weakness. But we are slowly eroding that away because it is not weak. You are not weak if you have mental illness. You are not. There should be no shame for opening up. And the stigma goes away as soon as we start talking about what's going on. Opening up and, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And that's what I did. I allowed myself to be vulnerable because I took my mask off.
Describe a little bit about your podcast, which your podcast is named Shit That Goes On in Our Heads, which I think that name right off the bat is something that would gravitate someone. Tell me a little bit about how the podcast originated and especially where the name came from.
So when I was like, still trying to unwind from all the horribleness that was in my head, you know, I I was going to the gym at the time, and that's like the one place I could go where my brain would actually stop because, I wanted to make sure one, I didn't fall off a treadmill, and two, I didn't drop a weight on my foot. But I was like circling names through my head, and I was like, I just have all this shit in my head. So Dirty Skittles and I sat down, we tried like different name combinations, but we always gravitated back to shit that goes on in our heads. The problem is the YouTubes of the world, the Googles, the Apples, and the Spotifys is you can't have the word shit in there. So we had to like make make an adjustment. So for us, we just put an exclamation point in there for the I, and it works. And you know, people, we all have shit that goes on in our heads, and I just thought it was such a perfect name for this podcast because when people come on, they're super vulnerable and they talk about things that they probably haven't talked to anybody else about. And that's part of the reason why we do an audio only podcast, because we get to protect our guests and their stories. And we've only had a few guests that have asked to, have the video, and we're okay with that. But we 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 don't do it on an anonymous basis, but we allow people to be themselves. And that's, when people come onto the show, they're like, or when they are reaching out to us and want to be on the show, they're like, it's the name that catches them. And then once they start listening to the podcast, then they figure out that it feels like we're all sitting around the fire shooting the shit, talking about life's crap, but also, getting really good like resources and tips and tricks on how they make it from day to day. And I think that's the power of our show. And just me and Dirty Skittles as co-hosts. We really bounce off of each other and we make each other laugh. And yes, we do laugh on the podcast, even during the hard subjects, because here's what laughter does. It makes those hard topics more digestible. It's easier to understand, and you get to see the humanness of it. And that to me is really important.
Yeah, I think laughter helps cut the tension very much a lot about it. I've done group therapy before, and when I have told my story about my mental health journey in there, I try to use comedy as a way to kind of break the tension up. So I would make kind of jokes in there and would try to just kind of lighten the mood up because every mental health story is not all rainbows and glitter. It's always very dark and it's very tragic. So you have to try to find a way to make it a lighter thing of discussion because um my, a lot of people have really dark pasts. And I remember one time there was a girl that was in our therapy group class. She said, you kind of tell the story in a funny way, but I feel like it would be very rude of me to laugh because it's such a serious story. And I said, well, I I just tell jokes and try to cut the tension off. I mean, if you want to laugh at something, feel free to. I always try to tell it in a lighthearted way, even though I come from my story's really dark as well. That it comes through your podcasting and the guests. What have been some of the most impactful conversations you've had that you can share?
So the first one that comes to mind was our friend Bookie, and God rest her soul. She had interviewed with us a month before she passed away. She had terminal breast cancer, and the things that she taught me in that episode still live with me. She did not have a bucket list. She lived every moment for the moment, and made me realize that yes, I need to get my affairs in order. So, right after that show, my wife and I we got our will done, we got our power of attorney, things like that, and it left such impactful hu- humanness to it, right? Of things that I need to think about that we don't really think about it. A month after we recorded with her, she passed away, but I know that she is watching over us. She was one of our biggest supporters, and we made her laugh, even on some of those really hard topics. And another really impactful, Dirty Skittles' dad is a licensed therapist, and so he came on the podcast twice. His name's Crazy Eight, and I go back and listen to his episodes a couple of times a week, because he left such good information for me. We've had so many great, amazing guests, and they're not celebrity guests. They're normal, everyday people that are that have either gone through or going through some really horrible stuff, but they all are working on getting to the other side of that. And that's what I did for myself. I took all that horrible, hard stuff and turned it into something really beautiful. And I get to, it's my passion. And I want to make sure that our messages get out to all the right people that can, you know, gained something from our podcast. We had a listener reach out to us a couple of weeks ago, and I, being the business manager for the podcast, I respond to every single inquiry. And she's like, I found you guys. I was looking on uh, Apple's mental health podcast, and your name came up, and I started listening to your podcast, and she couldn't stop listening. And she's like had her own mental health journey. And so I responded back to her, and she emailed me back, and she's like, oh my God, I'm fangirling a little bit. I had no idea that you guys were going to respond back to me. And, she's out there just like I was at that point when I hit rock bottom, that she wanted to make an impact on the world. So we actually had a opening for our August recording, and we're bringing her on as a guest because that's how we connect with people. We connect through laughter and being a human and being vulnerable and making it easy. Like we are two of the easiest co-hosts that you will ever be on. Like we just make it easy and we let people tell their whole story. Most podcasts you only get like 30 minutes to do a highlight reel. For us, we let people tell their full story. And so when I do my pre-interviews, I figure out if it's going to be like a one part episode or a 3-part episode. And actually, we just released season 13 starting today, and I kind of hemmed and hawed on this. It's a 3-part episode, and we release 2 episodes a week now. And I've had a number of people reach out to me and be like, "Really? We got to wait the entire weekend to find out what happens in part 2 and part 3." And that's kind of the glory of doing this, because you suck people in and they want to know the rest of the story. And for most of our guests, it is a happy ending, right? Some of them are still very sad endings, but these are people that want to make a difference in the world. And what we do as podcasters is really important because we're not geographically bound. Our episodes get listened to around the world. And so we're not only just touching lives here in the US, but in Canada and Japan and Australia and Turkey. And we had a listener in Somalia. I still try to figure that out. I don't look at the numbers anymore because I get anxiety over that, because all we did was picked up a mic and started sharing our stories and sharing the stories of other people in the world that have gone through something similar. And I think that's what's really important about my podcast, about your podcast, Noah, is we're out there making a difference. And no matter how depressed you are, you can still strive to see what the next day brings, because no matter how crappy today is, it may not be as crappy tomorrow. And if you are in crisis, literally in crisis, and you don't have anybody to talk to, call 988. It is not only a suicide ideation hotline, it is for crisis only. And the people that run that line are the most compassionate people you will ever talk to in your entire life. They are amazing humans. And they will give you the resources you need to make it to that next minute, that next hour, the next day. Because even if you don't believe it, you are needed, you are wanted, you are loved, and the world is a better place because you're here. And, I'm thankful every day to be alive.
Podcasting has such a huge, powerful way of getting out. You made a lot of good points about audience and how people around the world help it. I never imagined my podcast to go internationally at all, but I've gotten people from all different continents that listen to my podcast, and some in countries where I'm not even sure how they're able to hear and listen to what I have to say, but they're listening to it. And it's just such an impactful thing to do. I mean, I never imagined my podcast to be where it is now. I was similar like you. I just picked up a microphone and was just started talking, and I've had such impactful conversations on here. I've had some of the best interviews and I've met some of the best people on here. And when I first started, I did have to do like a quick 30, 40 minute talk trying to get their story in. And after a while, I realized that I can't do 30 minutes because they could be right in the middle of telling like their peak of their story and our time's running up. And so I took it upon myself to upgrade. And now it's such a more relaxed feeling knowing that they can tell their full story. I can just sit here and listen. I don't have to worry about having to cut them off and rush them telling their story. They can finally say it in full and not have to worry about their story getting cut off or anything. Um, when you started your business, what did you take from the experience you had at your previous job to put into this new company? What were some of the things that you decided to do the same, and what did you do differently?
I pretty much didn't do anything the same because corporate America burned me out. Like it, I'd worked in corporate America for 45 years. And so when I started my company, I wanted to make it a people-centric company. Really, customer first, taking care of the customer, really listening to them, and then adding the wellness part into that because when people are going through like a software change or a company change or anything, it's that transition state that that people's mental health tanks, and companies don't realize how much of a mental health toll that takes on employers or employees. So I want to work with like small to medium sized companies and give them the tools that they need to be able to help their employees thrive. One of the problems that small businesses have, unlike maybe like the Salesforce or the Microsofts out there, is they don't have big checkbooks, right? So they can't afford some of those mental health tools that are available to companies because it's a price point problem for them. And so one of the things I've started doing with my company is I am building apps that that will be more affordable for the small to medium sized companies that will give their employees those tools that they need to keep their mental health in check while they're at work, to help companies identify if employees are going through burnout, because there's so many managers out there that have no idea how to identify if somebody is burned out or if they're stressed out. Making sure that companies have numbers like the 988 crisis hotline on their bulletin board, their electronic bulletin board, or somewhere within the company so people realize that they have somebody that they can talk to, especially if they don't feel comfortable talking to HR. Reminding employers to tell employees about EAP programs. They're out there for a reason. A lot of smaller companies don't have those programs because they're cost prohibitive. So I am building software that will allow those companies to have the same types of tools that the bigger companies offer their employees.
What's been the biggest accomplishment you've seen from starting your own company and the biggest change you've seen in yourself by doing
It
it?
There are so many things. So, since I have my own company, I decided that I'm going to take every Monday off until it gets cold again. Everybody takes Fridays off, but nobody takes Mondays off. I take that third day and I totally disconnect from everything. Like, I don't do any of my company work, I don't do any podcast work. It's just me and my wife, and we've been doing a ton of fishing throughout the summer. And that has helped me to like find my zen. Um, Nature is such an incredible healer and helps you just kind of get out of your head. My biggest win for me is my mental health. This is the happiest I've been in over 20 years because I get to do this for me and not for everybody else. And I've met some incredible people and partners that, want to, that believe in our vision and what I'm trying to do, and just making, the working world a better place for employees, right? Um, Especially now, the world's kind of on fire. Okay, not even kind of on fire. The world is on fire, and employees are coming to work now, and they not only have their day-to-day stuff that they have to worry about, but there's a lot of stuff coming in from the outside. And it's really hard to manage that, especially if you're depressed or if you have ADHD or Asperger's. Change is hard on people. So giving them some tools that will help them make that change a little bit easier is the way to go. And, um, you know, like I said, I'm super fortunate that I get to do this.
Um, what have been some key lessons you've learned about resilience and personal growth that you believe everyone should know?
Resilience, that is a big one. So for me, resilience is still showing up for myself and not being that people pleaser and just showing up for other people. Resilience to me is like my form of self love. And, being an empath and being an extrovert, after 2.5 years, I figured out what my problem was. I didn't take care of myself. And yes, self love and self care are buzzwords, but they're really not. You need to take care of yourself. No matter what's going on around you, you need to make sure your heart is in a good place and your head's in a good place. And there's a real connection between your heart and your head. The other thing that I've learned is being super vulnerable and being honest about, where I came from and where I am now, especially when pitching new clients. When I shared my story on social media, it took me a full 6 months before I shared onto my professional network. But part of that was still the shame, the stigma, and the weakness. And then I decided, fuck it. Like if people are going to work with me, need to meet me where I'm at, right? Whether I'm in a good place or a bad place. And the reception was huge. People were very thankful that I opened up and let them know where I'm at. And the other part of all of this and how it all kind of works together is it helps me get out of my own head. We all get in our way sometimes, but I'm starting a business and I need new customers, so I had to come way out of my own comfort zone and like cold calling and cold pitching people. But um, big heads up, big clap for ChatGPT because they help me. It helps me like formulate some of those ideas. Like I have a lot of stuff here, but taking that stuff here and putting it on paper are two totally different things. The nice thing about chat is I can take my ideas from here, put it into chat, and they seem to make sense of my ramblings that are coming out of my mind. But I'm testing myself every single day. And at 62, like I'm using all the tools that are out there and available to me. And like I'm super proud of myself. But I think that I had to hit rock bottom to get here.
How do you think conversations about mental health can be more inclusive and supportive, especially for older adults?
We just need to open our damn mouths. Okay? Because here's what happens. We are all raised in an era where we were taught not to talk about it because, of shame and weakness and stigma. Well, now is the time to open up about it because, for me, um, being an extrovert, I have my mask on and I may look fine on the outside, but on the inside, I'm kicking myself every second. So it kind of goes back to being kind and kindness. And it costs you nothing to be kind because you have absolutely zero idea what's going on in somebody else's head. Zero. So take me as an example, you know, in the last quarter of 2022. You could have said something to me that would have really just triggered me because I didn't bother to tell anybody what was going on because I didn't know how to tell them. The problem that older Americans have is that we keep that shield on because we don't want our family or our loved ones, our friends to see that we are what we would say to ourselves as being weak or that there's so much shame in that. Okay, there is zero shame in opening up about your mental health. Zero. The worst thing you can do to yourself is to keep it all in your keeping it to yourself. That was the biggest worst thing I did for myself is I didn't open up. Start sharing with your friends. If you don't feel comfortable with a friend, contact 988. If you're in crisis, start having open lines of communication. Um, you know, go out to YouTube and listen to the Simon Sinek 8-minute video. Number one, it'll make you cry. But number two, it'll open you up to what 8 minutes could actually mean to somebody. So if you reach out to a friend and you say, I just need 8 minutes. If your friend is available, they should be listening with their ears and not their mouth. Because a lot of times we just need people to hear us out without getting stuff regurgitated back to us, right? Like
Yep.
call us out on our shit, right? If we are saying that we are struggling, ask us what we've done to help us get to that next minute, that next day, that next hour. Like ask more open-ended questions, but also be kind to yourself. Stop the negative talk because when we talk negatively to ourselves, think of it as like a text that you get from somebody that's in all caps and they're yelling at you. Like we say stuff to ourselves that we would never, ever, ever think of saying to somebody else. So be kind to yourself. And for the older Americans that are out there or just older people altogether, like we are not robots or humans. Give yourself patience and grace. You know what? We're all learning, all trying to figure out what's kind of going on in the world, and just be kind.
100%. Opening up about what you're going through is very important. That's something I think a lot of Americans and probably people everywhere worldwide deal with every day is they're scared to open up and share what they're going through. They're scared to think about what other people are going to say about what they're going through. That's how I was. I was scared to open up about anything, mainly because no one ever really wanted to hear what I had to say. I was always kept quiet. And that made me not want to open up and share what personal struggles I was going through. And that's just like the most important step that most people have to take first is open up and don't be scared to share what you're going through because you never know something that you may be going through might be something that they're waiting for to hear, and it could be something that they could 100% are dealing with, and they're scared, and having you open up and share your experience might help them open up and also share what they're going through.
100%. Like I said at the beginning of the show, every time we share our stories, we unlock somebody else's prison. And there are people out there in situations where maybe they can't open up to the people around them. And that's why there's crisis hotlines out there that are available to you and they're free and they're anonymous and like they will get you to that next spot, right? And maybe you can't afford therapy, but you can certainly afford to go to a support group. They're free. And there's nothing better than sharing your story with people that are like-minded, that have been through the same thing that you've been through.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such an important conversation to have with people about. Kind of to end things on one last question. What practical advice do you have for others who are facing mental health challenges or thinking about starting over later in life, what advice do you have for them?
So if you're really struggling with mental health challenges and you don't have anybody to talk to, contact a crisis hotline, contact 988. They can help you get those resources you need. If you're thinking about starting your own business, this is what I did. Like when I was sitting on the plane and I had my phone and ChatGPT and my resume, I like made a list of like things I really wanted to do and things I didn't want to do and focus on the stuff that you really want to do. I you know, the job market's hard out there right now, but if you're willing to like kind of put a little faith in yourself and shoot for the moon, I mean, you can't say it didn't work out if you didn't try. And I think that's part of the really cool thing that we have in the world is we can just try. Like we didn't think our podcast was going to take over, and look what happened there. still
Yeah.
scares still scares me every day. But believe in yourself. Where you may not have anybody else believing in you, believe in you. Believe in your story. Believe in what you have to offer the world, because you'll be surprised at what's on the other side. I know I am every single day.
Well, Gretchen, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story with my listeners. I think hopefully someone out there listens to this and is inspired to be not afraid to start over with their life again, and as well as try new adventures, whether they're 18 or they're 50, 60 years old that listen to my show. They'll know that by listening to this story that you can start over and start a new life at any age and have a successful career. Um, Feel free, please promote like where people can listen to your podcast, and if they would like to follow you on social media and if you have websites, feel free to just promote everything that you have.
Perfect. So if you want to follow the podcast, you can go out to goesoninourheads.net. All our social links are at the top of that page. And if you want to learn more about my company, you can go out to shosersolutions.com.
Well, and as I always say, I'll put all of these links in the description box. I'll put links to her podcast as well down there, and the websites and social media accounts that she has. I'll put them all down there so it's easy access for you. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. It's Lethal Venom Podcast for those, and Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It's now as podcast. Just feel free to follow those if you would like to keep updates about episodes and just some general news stuff that's coming out for the podcast. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcast from. Available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere. Wherever you get your podcast from, it's on there. Gretchen, thank you so much again for coming on, sharing your story. I really have enjoyed having you on here, and wish you the best of luck on everything. So keep fighting strong and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Noah. It was such a pleasure to be on your podcast. And for anybody out there, you're never too old to start over.
Well, I'd like to thank Gretchen for coming on here, sharing her story. As always, y'all stay safe out there. Y'all be good. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.